And our first guest tonight has been a long-standing critic of the Paris Climate Accord. He says Mr. Trump's decision to withdraw will afford Americans greater economic opportunity, cheaper, more flexible energy choices. Joining me now, Senator Mike Lee. He's the chairman of the Senate Steering Committee, a member of the Judiciary Committee, and he has authored the new book, Written Out of History, The Forgotten Founders Who Fought Big Government. Great to have you with us. Congratulations on the book.
Thank you.
Let's turn, if I may, first to the withdrawal by the President of the United States from the Accord.
It was a wonderful decision. Look, Pittsburgh before Paris. It's going to go down in history as one of the great political quotes of our time. This was undoubtedly not only good messaging, but the right decision. The American people deserve better than this. Look, Barack Obama knew what he was doing. When he negotiated a deal that he knew had not a prayer of being ratified in the form of a treaty by the United States Senate, he went ahead and negotiated it the way he did anyway, knowing full well it could never become law of the land as a treaty. So easy come, easy go. This was never binding in the first place. It's not.
That's what he said about the Iranian deal that he also didn't take to the Congress.
That's right. He knew the same thing both times. We've allowed too much power to be concentrated in presidents, and President Trump righted a wrong committed by the previous administration today. And
it was, even though there was all sorts of noise and from the left, from the Dems, they look so small now. When they are competing with a president who outlines his reasons, states his purpose, and says clearly and unequivocally to his constituents, who are the American workers, the American taxpayers, this one is for you, for America first, for our sovereignty. I mean, only fools would think they could compete with that kind of reasoning and that kind of language.
Especially whereas here we've got an American people who increasingly are understanding the connection between federal regulation and job growth. They're understanding the connection between the $2 trillion in regulatory compliance costs and who bears those costs. Well, it's really poor and middle-class Americans. It's not big corporate fat cats. It's the American worker who pays higher prices on goods and services and also pays for these costs with diminished wages, unemployment, and underemployment. President Trump stood up for them today, and he should be applauded for this.
Well, and he was in the Rose Garden. I mean, there was a group of people in audience to the president. I mean, they were unified. They were obviously energized by what he was saying and absolutely on board. There was no division even remotely apparent today in the White House or in that group of people. And it was a wonderful piece of imagery for this White House. Which suggests to me that they are making important communication turns here that will have lasting benefits to the president and his policies.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I thought it was significant that you saw a number of members of his cabinet and senior staff who were there not only at the reception, but also doing interviews afterwards, defending it. And their applause was echoed and magnified many, many times over by everyday American people, hardworking Americans everywhere, whose rights were defended by this, whose economic freedom was protected.
Yeah, $3 trillion, the cost of this idiot agreement that Obama led us into. Senator, I've got to ask you, is there anything that President Obama did in 8 years that wasn't destructive of the economy, our way of life? I mean, there are questions you simply have to ask at some point in his decisions and his policies. Whose side was he on?
Yeah, I think that's right. And look, I'm sure we could find something that he did that doesn't fit into that category.
Does it come readily to mind?
But this one would be this one was very bad. This one was particularly bad.
Yeah.
And in this case, he knew that it would have the potential not only to divide Americans, but also potentially to harm Americans.
Well, Americans have on occasion been divided, as you document and written out of history, the forgotten founders who fought big government. And we're going to start with one of your favorites. And by the way, this is the book. Senator Lee has written a very important book, which we recommend to you highly. Aaron Burr, you got to be kidding. Fighting big government and executive abuse of power.
When Aaron Burr was the Vice President of the United States under Thomas Jefferson, he presided as the president of the Senate over some impeachment trials of some of Thomas Jefferson's enemies. And he conducted those trials with due process. He was determined to stand up for the rights of the accused. He did this in a way that ended up infuriating Jefferson. And Jefferson, later, when Aaron Burr was no longer the vice president, had Burr prosecuted for treason, a capital offense, but for the fact that the Constitution contains special protections for those accused of treason. Aaron Burr might well have lost his life to Thomas Jefferson.
Well, it's a fascinating book. Again, I want to say we recommend it to you highly. Senator Mike Lee has written, I think, a fascinating book, and it's a delight to think that it's been since the inception of the Republic that we've been somewhat squalid in our politics on occasion and have overcome it. For some reason, that seems to me to be important, an important reminder these days. But, you know, what also occurred is the conservatives have been fighting big government since the founding. It hasn't worked. Is it a time for people to change their strategy and their approach? Because we really do need limited government, and we really do need smaller government. How do we get there?
They didn't call it conservative government back then. They just called it common sense. They called it liberty. They called it patriotism.
Well, I call everything I agree with common sense.
Exactly. But, you know, increasingly, what we're seeing is that even though technology changes, our economy has grown, our population has boomed, many of the issues that we face today are very, very similar. They very closely mirror those that we've faced since the Revolution, since the time of the founding. I tell the story in this book about some of the unsung heroes whose stories are inconsistent with the modern progressive message.
And a great read it is, again, we recommend it to you highly. Senator, great to have you here.
Thank you.
Enjoyed talking with you and raising our hopes for the survival of the Republic.